The European Union's General Data Protection Regulation has 99 articles. 64 of those articles are general provisions. The remaining 35 actionable articles are articles that companies must act upon in order to be in compliance with the general GDPR. When we look at breaking down those 35 articles, 15 of them fall into the business category. So this would be their glossaries, this would be policies, etc. 7 of those articles will fall into the assessment areas, and 13 into the technical areas. Now we will show how the ASG data intelligence platform will address these 35 articles. Logging into ASG's data intelligence platform as a data protection officer or DPO, we find that we have a customized menu of different portlets that will help us with the compliance efforts with general data protection. We can see that this dashboard concentrates on personal information from looking at different categories of the GDPR assessments, looking at different particular personal data elements, being able to look at the assessments and how we are progressing through the different systems, data stores, and transformations to be able to assess all those different areas. Looking at different categories and classifications of data so that we can see how we are conforming to that GDPR regulation. Going through the different systems, the different data elements, all that is a part of the standard portlets on the dashboard will give us the ability to manage all those different aspects of general data protection regulation. Today we'll be going through the GDPR glossary, and so I'll click on that, where we can find business rules, business terms, critical data elements, personal information, and then policies, processes, standards, etc. We will go through the flow of how these are all connected together, but know that we can also go directly to each one of these different steps versus following the flow and going through the series of events that I'll be taking you through. We'll click on the policy first. So at this point, looking at the GDPR policy, we can attach the entire document, so the 200-page document of GDPR regulation, and also we can have a short context from our legal and compliance groups that can tell the enterprise exactly what we're concerned about and how to handle those different bits of regulation within GDPR. We can also go to navigation and look at the references and usages to see that visualization on how the GDPR policy that we are just looking at is connected to things like the standards of the regulation itself. So assigning different teams, different workflow, different processes to be in compliance with each segmentation of that GDPR policy. We can have business rules associated with it, as well as the privacy impact assessments. Let's take a look at the order entry process that we are assessing. So we come into the order entry process. We can see the general information about it, so the definitions. We can see who's responsible for this regulation, or I'm sorry, this process. And then we can also see other policies and different assessments that may be related to this order entry process. We can go into the different aspects of the assessment, such as the data and supporting assets. So we can not only ask the questions of, how does the life cycle of the data process work, so that we have a clear understanding in case we are audited and have a regulator in our midst. We can see what data elements are associated with this privacy information related to the order entry process. We can see what applications are a part of this order entry process and if there's any assessments associated with them. We can go into assessing risk of these different applications and indeed this process. And we can look at the rights of the data subjects. We can look at existing plans and measures, such as encryption, who has access to the data, et cetera, to ensure that we are protecting that data. We can also see the risk associated with the applications and this process to ensure that we are only utilizing the privacy information for our core business. Now we will transition back to the traceability diagram that we were looking at. We'll go into the right to be forgotten, and as you can see, we can have just as many different segments of the GDPR regulation as we need to assign different teams, different workflow, etc. Let's go into or I should say, isolate to the right to be forgotten, and we'll go down to our navigation button here and we'll do our references and usages. So now we have looked at or isolated the right to be forgotten, which we can see is attached to the GDPR policy and extends into a GDPR removal request. And so this is a process that if we click into it is really the way I look at it, geared towards certain job functions or different aspects of the regulation that we must do in order to be in compliance with the regulation. In this case, I've tailored it to a help desk operator duty. And so if a European Union citizen calls in, and the help desk operator says hello. He knows what questions to ask. He has instructions to know what to do with this information. He has lifelines to be able to transfer these different questions to or different individuals to the system owners to get detailed information. I can also go under my navigation button and be able to see what data elements are associated with the GDPR removal request. So I can see that these data elements include account numbers and addresses and first name, last name, and so on down the line. I have the ability to do a right click on any of these data elements, go down to data lineage, and look at what different systems are being made use of with this privacy information. So I can see from a 50,000-foot level that I come in through my Salesforce application, and that Salesforce application feeds into my data warehouse, and that data warehouse feeds all these different systems downstream. So from a 50,000-foot view, I have a good understanding of how that privacy information flows, what systems make use of it, and I can explain how the different systems are utilizing the individual's privacy information. Now I can go down to a technical detail level as well. And so we can see that through the critical data element or the email address that's in my glossary, it is attached to the physical environment. So this is the table within the Salesforce application that holds the column of email address. And we can see as we cascade down through that this email underscore address goes into my Exadata data warehouse and becomes email. And as we continue down the sequence of our lineage, we can see that it goes into my Golden Gate application as email address, and then it becomes notification email in my Kamaji application. And then we can see that it goes down into my Golden Gate application as user ID. So there's no email in the naming function within that column of information. But we can see it goes into my business intelligence environments and into the reporting that I can see, as well as all the way down to my customer loyalty application where it says created by. Now, if I were a developer and came in, what I would see is this privacy tag, which has been automatically tagged because way back at the beginning, I defined the critical data element as being privacy information and therefore must track through the infrastructure as privacy information. If I'm a developer and I come in and I'm working on my customer loyalty program, then I can see that this created by column is tagged with privacy information, and that I do have a personal information tab to click on to see that this created by column is actually stemming back to email address and carries these different attributes called personally identifiable, yes or no. Is it sensitive? Is it sensitive with another one? So if first name and last name are combined, it becomes sensitive. What are the different classifications and closure rules and categories? So I have all sorts of attributes that we can assign to privacy information out of the box, or you can very easily configure your own without any programming to have a full complement of attributes for your business. At this point, what we can do is transition into a global search because one of the things that is part of GDPR as well as other privacy regulations is that have a minimal number of stores that make use of the privacy information. So I'm going to do a global search. I can filter it down to whatever I want to search through. But at this point, what we're looking at is a technical information that is related to email, and I can see that I have 313 matches on email, and that on the left-hand side here, that we have the segmentation. So I have 11 instances of email in my glossary. 133 in my relational databases. So this might be an area where I can cut out that duplicate data, be able to get the trusted sources down from 133 instances in my relational databases down to, let's say, 10 trusted sources for that email address coming in. And you can see that we have all sorts of different technologies that this is segmented into. I can filter by them, etc. At this point, I'm going to log off, and I'm going to log back in as administrator. And the reason I'm doing this is because in the data protection officer, I do not have the rights to be able to look at unstructured data. So what we're doing here is we're coming in. You'll notice that the dashboard is considerably different from the DPOs. And what I want to do is go down to this personal information portlet and be able to click into ordinary information. And so we can see that we have all sorts of data elements that are considered personal information. And if I go into a last name, for example, what I can see is that, obviously I have the definition, I can have long descriptions, I can have all this types of information, but then I can go to the implementation and cascade tab, and I can see where the last name is being utilized. And so if I look down here, I can see that I have last name as part of all these different documents, such as bank statements and all sorts of cool stuff like that. I can see that it is a data file type, that it is from the Mobius repository, but this could be SharePoint, it could be Documentum, it could be FileNet, it could be any of those different things. I can see what type of document it is. So it really kind of pinpoints, where privacy information is within my unstructured data. And for now, that is our data intelligence platform made for GDPR, CCPA, and other privacy regulations. Thank you.